and I have two of my favorite people on the planet here to talk about the trade deadline, to talk about the Astros getting Justin Verlander. And as we're going, there will probably be more trades because the deadline just ends right now. And so we'll be keeping track. But Dalton Brown and Brandon B.C. Capello join me, two of my favorite baseball minds. And I know you guys have all invested in Astros futures to win the division. We'll start with you, Dalton. How do you feel now that they picked up Justin Verlander?
Yeah, I think the Astros at this deadline did exactly what you'd expect from a team that's all in to win now. They went and got a top of the line starting pitcher in Verlander, especially when he's been pitching recently. He's been phenomenal. And then they went and got Kendall Graveman. I don't think that move should be slept on either. I think their bullpen needed a guy like that. Mission accomplished as far as the Astros are concerned, and I think it's all systems go from here. I feel good about it. So we'll see.
Brandon, your thoughts?
All systems go. I like what you did there, Dalton. No, absolutely. I love it as well. I mean, when Dalton and I were doing the Touch 'em All baseball show, we were always trying to find value on the Astros to win the AL West, win the pennant, maybe even win the World Series. And the odds never shifted. Like Dalton just said, they did what we expected them to do. And the market thought the same thing as well. They never fell farther than maybe third or fourth, possibly, in the AL to win the pennant. And their odds seem to keep fluctuating between 5 and I think we're 5 at the lowest point and 8 at the highest, or 9. You can find some books right now with the JV move, which I still think is tremendous value. So absolutely, I love it. The only real threats in the AL right now are the Orioles, the Rays, and the Rangers. We can break that down a little bit later, but yeah, I'm with Dalton. I'm with you guys. I absolutely love the move. All systems go times 2.
All right, I want to get your opinion on this. And Dalton and I were talking a little bit before we came on. The first thing I noticed from Astros Twitter, which I don't have a lot of respect for, most people loved it, but then there's a lot of, oh my God, they gave up too much. And I'm thinking to myself, how many of you have actually seen these guys play that they're giving up? And, oh, they could have just signed him for this. Well, with what the Mets are paying, they're getting a bargain on him for the next couple of years. I mean, he's going to get paid less than the invisible Lance McCullers. And so basically the Mets are paying $50 million for a couple of prospects that we've never seen play. And I don't care if Gilbert turns into Mike Trout. You have a chance to win the World Series. That is your only goal when you're a team like the Astros, when you're a team like the Dodgers or the Braves. I mean, there's a small group there where you can win every year. You go all in. You put your chips in the middle, and if somebody wants to call you, so be it. I don't think they gave up that much. And I saw somebody say, oh, well, the Rangers only gave up this guy for Max Scherzer. Well, Justin Verlander's been better than Max Scherzer. And the Rangers gave up a top 10 MLB prospect for him. Astros don't have that. So tell me how this is a bad deal for the Astros.
I mean, from my perspective, it's not. I think there's something to be said for the fact that when if you're the Astros and your top prospect is maybe cracking the top 70 in baseball, dealing your top prospect becomes a much smaller deal than it would be otherwise. And so to me, they're just dealing from the position that they're in. I think they recognize that they're not a prospect stacking team right now. And like you and I talked about before we went on air, parades are better than prospects. And I think the Astros are taking another parade. And why wouldn't they, right? I mean, you can deal with the ramifications as a few years from now if it comes down to that. And if the Astros are struggling a few years from now, you'll look back and say, hey, they won 2, 3, 4 World Series over an 8-year span or whatever it ends up being. Then, yeah, you're not very upset about it.
Well, there's a lot of teams out there that would love to have that problem. And, this kind of goes back to and I'll go back to the Nationals, who won the World Series and then basically tore the team down. But wouldn't you rather have that? Wouldn't you rather have that one time to win the World Series? And realistically, you're supposed to win one every 30 years, right? And they've done it in a window. And the Astros have done more than that, just like the Dodgers. I mean, just like the Braves. They're there every year. That's a hard thing to do. And these are well-run organizations that have stars, that have guys that are homegrown, but then they add to it. And that's what prospects are for, right? They either turn into a player for you or you trade them for a player. And I will always take the guy who's been successful. and I think that's what you're supposed to do. And anybody who, and I mean, I don't mean to call all these guys idiots, maybe really stupid idiots, but the reality is, you look at what the Astros have done, just like the Dodgers, they're there every year. I mean, how many teams would like to be that? Padres and Mets went out and tried to buy a whole team, didn't work out. And these guys are there every single year because they know what they're doing. And Brandon, you and I have talked about this a little bit. Sometimes you trade away prospects who become something. And I still get into Twitter arguments with a guy over Teoscar. Say, oh, I can't believe they traded Teoscar and got, Nelson Liriano. And people forget Nelson Liriano had a perfect inning that helped them win the World Series. I will take that. I'll trade my own son for that. And Brandon, I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on that.
No, I'm exactly with you guys. I mean, you build your farm system up. That is your war chest. That is your armory. Those are the bullets that you use to go out and get bigger guns, more established and veteran guns, especially for the period that the Astros are in right now. Every one of those prospects should be on the block right now. Nobody is untradeable in the prospect system that doesn't get you a proven winner like a Justin Verlander, or even a piece that you needed like a Kendall Graveman in the bullpen. Uh, Dalton's right. Actually, Dalton's probably conservative in saying that our best prospect isn't even 70. He's probably closer to like 100. I mean, our farm system is completed. Yeah. But the fact that we can get JV by just trading a couple of guys who might have a number 1 and a number 4 next to their name just because they're in our system, but would have a number 80 or 90 next to their name in the grand pool of prospects. I mean, people don't realize that. They see that number and they somehow think that we gave up what was left of our farm. The farm's never been there. What we did, and Dana Brown, kudos to him. The guy was brought in because his forte is player scouting and player development. So if you're losing guys like that who are on the back end of the 100 for a Hall of Famer twice, 3 times now over in Justin Verlander, then someone of his talents, if he is as advertised, should replenish those prospects in no time at all.
Well, and under team control for not just this year, but next year and the year after, at very reasonable numbers now, and a guy who fits here. And one thing that's important, and I think Dalton and I talked about this a little bit yesterday when we were talking about the trade deadline. When you have that horse at the top of the rotation, it takes the pressure off of everybody else. It's like, Justin Verlander is taking the ball in game 1. If you're Framber Valdez and Christian Javier, and you're good pitchers, but you're not that horse. Justin Verlander's that horse. Max Scherzer is that horse. And that's why they're just so hard to find. Clayton Kershaw is that horse when he's healthy. And it's just so hard to find those guys. And when you get one, it changes your entire dynamic. And I think that if you're an Astros fan, you should be really excited today. And, I still hope they can get another bat because, and Dalton and I talked about this yesterday, Michael Brantley ain't coming back. Let's But this roster, as constructed right now, is the same one that won the World Series last year. Pretty much, top to bottom. Now that you have Alvarez back, now that you have Altuve back, this is the same roster. And that doesn't guarantee you anything. And Dalton is a Dodgers fan. You know this. It's like you could have the best roster. It doesn't always equal success. But now you're in a position, right? And that's what this move does.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, right? At the end of the day, it's a team full of proven guys. I heard you talk with Joe about it last week. The Astros are a team that over the last several years has had a knack for hitting in big moments. They don't leave runners in scoring position with 2 outs in the postseason. They have a lot of guys who are cut from that postseason cloth that works. So I think it especially makes sense for them to bring back a guy who's as familiar with the clubhouse as Justin Verlander is, as Kendall Graveman is, frankly, as well. I think it really was a win for them at the deadline. And unfortunately for me as a Dodger fan, I'm sitting here watching my team, have a no trade clause invoked against them and not seemingly get anything done. So I'm pretty jealous in that sense.
Well, but you know what? And that's the thing about trades, right? It's like, and you guys were in on a lot. And again, we may still get something here after the deadline. And I hope you guys are watching Twitter to see. But the reality is, people always say, "Oh, do this, do that." you have to have two teams that want to do it. And in Verlander's case, he wanted to come back to Houston. And he had a no trade, so it worked out fine. And Scherzer had a no trade, and he decided on the Rangers. But yeah, you can't just say, "Oh, go get this guy," because I mean, you guys had a deal in place, and he just didn't want to come there. What do you do?
Yeah. I mean, you can't do anything about it. The only part of it that's disappointing is you wish that conversation had happened before 4 o'clock Central Time when you're an hour from the deadline. You'd like to see, some sort of back and forth happen where they find that out in enough time to make a different deal. Maybe the Dodgers pursue Verlander in a totally different way if they don't view Erod as a fallback. Maybe they end up pursuing Flaherty in a different way. It's hard to know. So that part of it's frustrating, but I mean, that's the thing, right? I'm frustrated right now because the Dodgers seem to have hugged their prospects.
Right.
At the end of the day, prospects have two uses, right? They are either going to become impact major leaguers for you, or they're going to become trade chips for you. Those are both valid uses for a prospect. And it sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But those are both valid uses for a prospect. And if they're not going to become a major leaguer, you need to trade them.
Well, I want to get to Brandon on this, but I want to ask you about that first, okay? Because especially if you're the Dodgers. Now, the Astros don't have the prospects that the Dodgers have. The Dodgers have done a great job building their farm system. But not all those guys, I mean, a lot of them are blocked. And, that goes back to some of the trades the Astros made that helped them win 2 World Series is, those guys aren't going to get an opportunity. And even with Carlos Correa, the reason they let him walk is because they knew they had Jeremy Pena. And, he was ready to step in. And there's a few guys you can do that with. But, I mean, you look at the Dodgers and you look at, several teams, and I think the Phillies are kind of there too. Where are these guys going to play? So why you either have to trade your big league guy, which you don't want to do because he's helping you win, or trade the prospect. And, don't think twice about it. Maybe he turns into a star, but I saw a great stat on, been watching MLB.com's coverage all day. Less than 11% of these guys become all-star caliber players. They get traded. Less than 3% become really good players. So, you're always going to be a prospect until you're a player. And I'm just curious, like as a Dodger guy, why hang on to all these cats? Because they're not going to make the roster. Who's going to be better than Mookie Betts?
Right. And I think, the Dodgers are in a unique place with it too, because right now they have such a glut of very solid pitching prospects, right? I mean, Bobby Miller, Emmett Sheehan, Mike Brian Pepio, these are all guys we've seen at the major league level already. Some have been successful, some haven't, even Gavin Stone. But these are guys that they believe in, and these are guys that, generally speaking, talent evaluators around the league believe in. And the problem is those guys are being forced up to the major league level because they've got incredible injuries to the pitching.
Right.
At some point, though, you got to package a couple of them and get a legit major league starter, because you're not trying – I think part of the Dodgers' issue over the last several years, there are a lot of them. My biggest one's the manager, but I can get into that another time. But I think one of their bigger issues for me is they build a team that can win sustainably over the course of a regular season and over regular seasons. But they don't – most of the time, they don't build a team that can win with that punchiness in the postseason, right? And I think we're looking at that again this year. I don't know if Kershaw – I don't know how healthy he's going to be down the stretch. Walker Buehler's probably not walking through that door in a way where he can actually start games for you. So you're going to end up with these rookies having to start playoff games. Maybe it works, but I would rather go all in now and trust the fact that we're going to be able to develop more guys like that down the line.
Yeah, and Brandon, I want to bring you in on this because I still think these teams, both of them, are going to be in the mix for another World Series. Even though the Dodgers didn't do anything, they're still good enough. They're still the best team in the National League, in my opinion. Maybe the Braves. You can make an argument, but they're in the mix. And in the postseason, especially if you get a couple of these guys back, you're going to be fine, right? Because you don't need 6 starters in the postseason. And that's why I love the whole Verlander thing. But Brandon, I want to ask you, I want to go back to Kendall Graveman because I think that is an underrated pickup for the Astros. It helps a bullpen that's in trouble. And yes, they give up Corey Lee, who's a catching prospect, but they have a better one in Diaz.
Right.
And who knows what he's going to be.
He's going to be our DH. That's what he's going to be. I mean, there's no other way around it. Maldonado's now your catcher. He's going to catch JV, always has. He's going to catch
Yeah.
Fromm. You got Javier, I believe. Yanier, I think he's sat for Fromm or for Javier a couple of times. But I mean, with Maldonado doing all the catching, Yanier is going to be your DH. So that's what he's going to be. That's going to be our value or his value to us. We really wanted another bat. We wanted another outfield bat. Yeah, Chas is playing well, but Jolks, his offense is just taking a nosedive in the past month.
Yeah.
So you just kind of look at him to hopefully pick it up, maybe platoon him with somebody that we pick up maybe later on. But Yanier is going to be our DH, and of course, we just got to rely on Chas to keep popping out there in center field.
Yeah, the one thing I look at the rotation now, and it's Verlander, Valdez, Javier, Hunter Brown, J.P. France, who's been an incredible find for them, but he's got no postseason experience, and we know Fromber and Javier can pitch in the postseason, but there's an old saying in hockey, and Brandon and I were talking about this earlier. It's like your best players have to be your best players, right? And it sounds simple, but the truth is Bregman, Alvarez, Altuve, all these pitchers have to be at their best if you're going to win. And the question is, was last year a little bit of a fluke in the postseason when all of these guys pitched out of their mind? Verlander was their worst starter in the postseason. The bullpen gave up 1 run in 27 innings. I mean, that's unheard of. Do you think they'll be able? I mean, they don't need to do that again to win. But Dalton, you first. Do you think that's close enough? If they just get close.
Well, I think you can point at virtually any World Series winner and to some extent call it a fluke, because the reality with baseball is when you take a 162 game sample, which is more or less a representative sample that's designed to suss out who the good teams are versus who the not good teams are,
Right.
to put it super simply. And all of a sudden you're trying to win 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 7. You're not necessarily ascertaining from that who's the better team, right? Really what you're doing is you're ascertaining who can play better this week, who's in better form right now, who can perform better in this moment, right? And so I think in reality, every World Series team is going to do certain things that wouldn't have been sustainable throughout a season. And it's just a matter of identifying, like, who are the guys who I think can produce that when they need to.
Yeah, it's like, and not to go back to hockey again, but it's the hot goalie syndrome, right? It's like you get a starting pitcher who goes nuts and relief pitching that goes nuts like they did last year, and you can beat anybody, and
Right.
and I don't know if you're a Kings fan, being a Dodgers fan, but when Jonathan Quick was the brick wall, it really didn't matter who they were playing. The Kings were going to win. And he basically won 2 Stanley Cups for him like that. And that, I think baseball is the closest sport to that. It's really hard in football and other sports for one guy to be able to impact a game like that. But boy, you get 1 or 2 pitchers who are out of their minds, and yeah, you can win a World Series. We've seen it. I mean, and I'm way older than you guys, but going back to when the Twins had 2 pitchers, Frank Viola and Bert Blyleven, and they trotted them out there every game, and that's how they won the World Series, because nobody could hit them. And they weren't the best team. They just had 2 pitchers that you couldn't touch at the right time. And I think that's a big part of postseason. Brandon, I want to ask you, because like one of the things that a big topic today was like the Yankees aren't doing anything. If you're the Yankees, and it's kind of a mixed bag, right? Because there was one guy, oh, well, they need to rebuild. They're in last place in the AL East. Yeah, but they're only 3.5 out of the wild card. You can turn that around in a week. We've all seen it. If you're the Yankees, what are you doing? I mean, they wound up, I think they acquired 1 player at the end. Not a big acquisition, but and I want to get back to Kendall Graveman in a minute, because that doesn't sound like a big acquisition, but I think it is. But if you're the Yankees, what will you have done?
I would have jettisoned the season with the Judge injury that was extended. He was supposed to go on the 30-day. It turned into the 60, I think. And now he's back, and the offense still isn't right. So, I mean, I really haven't paid a whole lot of attention to the Yankees, to be honest. I bet on them not to make the playoffs. So I've been
But
following
I'll push
that.
back on that a little bit because we know how injuries are, right? And going back to Verlander was coming off an injury, and he wasn't great when he first came back. And it takes guys a bit, and I think it's going to take Judge a bit. But there's no reason he doesn't get better. I mean, now he's not going to be the Aaron Judge he was for the first half of last year, right? That was insane, and it was a contract year. But there's no reason why he can't get better. And you're only 3.5 games out of the wild card, and you're the New York Yankees. You can't just punt. I mean, you think Yankees fans would accept that? There's very few fan bases in the world where you can say, "Oh no, we're not going to just punt." The Yankees are one of them.
Well,
So
definitely not. But the AL East is the most competitive division in baseball. You're going to have at least one wild card out of there. I'm actually surprised how they're only 3.5 games back right now. But Baltimore is now on top out there. I don't think they're going to maintain it though. They just don't have the pitching. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dalton, but I don't think they've made a move to improve their starting pitching. And on top of that, uh, who just went on the IL for them?
no, they did acquire a starting pitcher here a few minutes ago.
Okay, who'd they get?
I got to go
They
back and look.
yeah they got a bullpen arm, Keenan Middleton. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if they got a starter.
I
Middleton.
think they got a starter too. I'm watching the scroll as we do this, but
Gotcha.
you know, multitasking.
I mean, you see that lineup, and you think that offense should keep them in the game or should keep them in every game. At the very beginning, their offense was completely predicated on the long ball. When Dalton and I broke it down, every single Yankees appearance, it seems, in the early part of the season, him and I were on team total overs because it was just dinger, dinger, dinger. And that was the only way they were winning. The pitching's not there. A lot of their older arms, like Herman and Servino and those guys, they're not pitching well. Garrett Cole has been the only competent arm I would say that you can kind of count on. Schmidt's been a nice revelation for him, but if it's not Cole going out there, you can't depend on the offense and even for Cole to give them any type of run supports, and that hasn't changed since Judge has gotten back. So you play
Right.
out the string of what it is. I don't know if you expend any assets. You don't punt, of course, because it's New York. It's the pinstripes.
Right.
But also don't expend any assets. If you get a wild card, you get a wild card. Great. But this is going to be a very just play out the string type season for the rest of the year for the Yankees. I think.
Yeah, except again, I mean, when you really look at the wild card standings, and right now the Astros are in the middle of that, by the way. But the Jays, the Red Sox, the Yankees, they're all right in the middle of it. And I mean, 3.5 games is nothing. We've seen this 100 times. And of course, I hear people say, "Oh, well, you got to jump all these teams." It's like, no, you just have to get on a 9-1 run, and suddenly you're over those teams, right, Dalton?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is astounding to see like how low the bar can be on what teams consider for buying or selling. I'm not like for the Padres are a similar example for me on the other side, right? Like I'm not surprised to see the Padres going and getting Garrett Cooper, going and getting a couple guys. I mean, they're not getting Rich Hill, they're not getting huge impact guys, but they don't view themselves as out of it because they know that they're talented and they know that, like you said, 1-9-1 streak and they're right there, right? So I for one, I was a little bit surprised to see the Yankees not buying a little bit more. I thought, somebody like a Cody Bellinger from the Cubs, obviously they would have needed to move early on that, but I thought something like that would have made sense for them. I do think if you're the Yankees, you need to pick a lane and go.
Yeah.
What I'm not a fan of with some of these teams is when they just sit there in neutral and just kind of just freeze, right?
Right.
For me, I think you either need to start sending away guys like Donaldson, like Rizzo, some of these older guys who aren't producing, and just see if you can get them for a couple prospects from teams who just want to give them a new change of scenery. Maybe you trade a bullpen arm away. But for me, if you're the Yankees, you need to pick a direction and go with it. You should either be buying or selling. I don't think they should be in neutral.
Yeah, and they very much are. And so, so the starting pitcher I was talking about to the Orioles is Jack Flaherty, who I know the Dodgers were in on.
Yeah.
What do you think of that move for Baltimore?
I mean, I
They
love it
needed
for
it.
Baltimore.
Yeah, big time, big time. You can't go into the postseason with Gibson, Bradish, and Dean Kremer as your ace. It's just not going to work out.
Yeah, and it's funny, and this we're talking about the Yankees, but I'll kind of throw the Red Sox and the Blue Jays into this conversation too, and the Rays for that matter. I just don't buy into the Orioles are ready to close this thing out. And we've got a lot of baseball to play. And yes, they've been pretty good. I mean, they've been really good. But sustaining that is the hard thing. And this is why I keep going back to same teams like the Astros, the Braves, the Dodgers. They go through their low points, but then they'll reel off 10 in a row when you're not paying attention. And the later in the season you get, the better those teams are. Can the Orioles do that?
I mean, for my money, no. I don't. I just don't think they have the starting pitching even with Jack Flaherty. Jack Flaherty's a name. He's a guy who has had some great years, but he also has a 4.68 expected ERA this season.
Right.
More often than not, this season he's actually struggled. I think there's a little more in the tank. And I think the Orioles might get some of that out of him. But I still don't think they have a playoff-ready rotation or a stretch-run-ready rotation. For me, the team to beat in the AL East is the Blue Jays. I know they're a few games out. I know they're not, the top dog at the moment, but that's a rotation that in a playoff series can intimidate you a little bit when you're looking at Gausman and you're looking at Barrios. I think that's a lot more of a talented. I think that's the most talented staff and lineup in the AL East. If I'm a team like the Astros or a team like the Twins, I want the Blue Jays to either not make the playoffs or get sent to a wild card because I think they're the scariest team outside of Houston in the AL.
I think that's a fair assessment because, and you know what? The thing about the Jays, just like the Astros, I don't think they played their best baseball yet. I think they're working up to it. And I think down the stretch, they're going to play their best baseball. And that's the difference, right? Like, I think the Rays have played as well as they can play. I think the Orioles have played over their head. And I think the Jays still have an up arrow that can surpass both of those, just like I think the Astros have an up arrow that can surpass the Rangers. But when I look at the whole thing, I look at the AL Central and I'm like, does anybody want to win this division? And isn't that who you want in the first round of the playoffs? Whoever wins that division?
For the Jays?
No, the AL Central. Twins or Guardians or.
No, I just want to have a quick note about the Jays to finish up what Dalton was saying. They picked up Paul DeJong from St. Louis. I think that was a very good pickup since you don't know if Bo Bichette's going to come back or not. That guy was very, very good. He's been slumping lately in St. Louis, but I thought that was an outstanding pickup. So, yes, the Jays are very dangerous. I'm sorry, Falcon, what was the question again?
Well, before that, I'll just say the thing about DeJong is like Bichette's going to be back soon, but that's a guy who can eat up some innings for you in the infield and contribute. So I think that was a quiet, great pickup. But no, my question is like, who wants to win the AL Central? I mean, it's like these guys don't seem like they're even trying.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple comments that I'm seeing here that I totally agree with too. I mean, Todd the Show saying that division's a disaster. Guardians trading away Savali is a sign of how dumb that division is. Yeah, it's a mess, right? I mean, you could make a legitimate argument that the White Sox wouldn't be crazy for going for it, given how bad that division is. They're obviously not doing that. At this point, I think the Twins have probably more of a stranglehold on it than even the standings make it look like. The Guardians are not getting Bieber back anytime soon. Savali's gone. They're going to be reliant on McKenzie getting healthy at some point. They need Gavin Williams to pitch well, the rookie. So at this point, Minnesota has that division by a stranglehold. And I think the Twins at this point are looking at it and going, all right, well, we can finish 500 this season, win the division, head into the playoffs. And that I think, a lot of these organizations look at the playoffs as, hey, you just get there and maybe you get hot. And so I don't think they were very motivated to do a whole lot. I think Minnesota looks at it and goes, hey, let's maintain what we're doing for now, see if we can build some momentum, and then hopefully build something in the offseason and next year, because that division I don't think is getting much better either. The Tigers have some young, intriguing pieces, but they're still a couple years away. And so I think it's created a culture of complacency across the division where Minnesota knows they don't need to do a whole lot.
Right. So let me ask both of you guys this, and I'll start with Brandon. It's like if you're in a position where you're going to make the playoffs, but you don't think you can win the World Series, are you buyers or sellers? And that's kind of how I feel about the Twins and the Guardians. I mean, the Guardians got Syndergaard, but he's not great. What are you doing if I'm going to make you GM of those teams? What do you do?
Falcon, it's kind of like when you're at the poker table and you're playing with a short stack. You know all about that. Your moves have to be calculated. If you see the perfect deal or the perfect opportunity to strike, then you can push all in. But for the most part, you lay back, wait for a good hand to come around. I don't, you don't, anything can happen when you get to the playoffs. If you got the pitching, especially, or if you just got a great offense, you can make a push. I don't think the Twins necessarily have either. So if I were the GM, like I said, I'd run out the string. I don't know if I would be a buyer necessarily. I would definitely add to the depth. I need some more hitting, of course, if I'm going to match with some of the other playoff teams in the AL. But no, I wouldn't expend any assets. I would basically just know that if I set myself up now for a win at 500 in my division, I can be smart with my assets and with my acquisitions and dominate that division for the next 5 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of answer the same question, I think what Brandon is saying is exactly what the Twins are doing. I don't necessarily think it's what they should be doing. If I'm the GM of the Twins, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, hey, I've got an opportunity here to basically get like a get into the playoffs free card situation in that division. And so if I'm the Twins, I'm going, hey, because the thing that the Twins have that a lot of these teams don't have in the American League is they have some horses between Pablo Lopez, Sonny Gray. They've got Joe Ryan. They've got guys that if you get into a short series in the playoffs and those guys are pitching well, that could be a little bit intimidating. Their problem is on the offensive side, and they have a glut of young outfielders. I think the Twins could have dealt a guy like Max Kepler or a guy like Matt Wallner and maybe improved somewhere on the infield, maybe pick up more of a contact-oriented hitter because their big issue is they strike out all the time and they don't make enough contact. They rely on the home run ball. So I think they could have done something to balance out their team a little bit more. But again, I think it comes down to the complacency of we can go 81-81 and win this division, so why don't we go 81-81 and win the division and see what happens?
Yeah, see, so my opinion on that is, yeah, if we go 81-81 and win the division, you're still getting me to the final table, right? And if I'm at the final table, if I get the right cards, I can win. And we talked about it earlier, like the hot goalie in hockey. If your pitching gets hot at the right time, I mean, there's no reason that a team can't have guys. And we look back at the Astros World Series last year, and the way that bullpen pitched, there's no reason a team can't do that. You don't need to score a lot of runs to win that way. And I mean, it's been a while since we've seen a team win like that, but it's still possible. And I'll take that every time. I mean, rather than, okay, let me trade a couple of my guys for prospects so we can keep kind of rolling it and maybe we win the World Series. If I'm in the playoffs, I got to feel like I have a chance. Things just have to go my way.
I mean,
And
it's accurate.
so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Brandon, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, I suppose. I mean, like you said, if you make it to the final table, anything can happen. Chips can fall your way. But the problem is, if we're not getting cards, you can only bluff for so long. If you don't have the offense, or you don't have enough pitching to at least win you a game or two to push it to your city, or to get into the back of their rotation, I mean, you're going to get blown away. And these teams that are in the AL, I mean, they all got a good 1-2 punch. Now Baltimore has an okay 1-2 punch. But Tampa, us,
Texas.
Toronto, and Texas,
Yeah.
outstanding 1-2 pitchers now.
And ideally, that's what you want going in, right? And the difference is in postseason from regular season is, your rotation shrinks, and you really, if you have four guys that can go out and win for you, you've got an opportunity. Doesn't mean they're going to. And really, with the Astros last year, as good as Verlander was, I mean, Cy Young, amazing season. Postseason, he was worn out, and having him at the top of that rotation, I think it helped everybody else. But I think we can argue, I mean, make a pretty good argument. He was the worst starter for the Astros last year in the postseason, and that can happen. And so, you need a guy like that, but you need the other guys to step up. And it's just no one could have seen what Javier had coming. No one could have seen what Valdez had coming. Luis Garcia, 5 shutout innings against the Mariners. I mean, we would be lying if we said, "Hey, oh yeah, I know he can do that."
Jose
And
Urquidy.
you can get that though, right? And that's how you take a team that's on the cusp to a team that can win a World Series.
Yeah, and I think what you were just touching on there goes back to why the Astros deserve credit for making the move they made for Verlander today. Because the Astros, in my estimation, made a decision in the offseason. They said, hey, Framber Valdez is a potential Cy Young candidate. Christian Javier has shown he can do it on the big stage. Luis Garcia looks great. Urquidy, serviceable, and then some. McCullers, hopefully, will be back at some point. And they look at that and they go, hey, we have a good rotation. As much as we'd love to bring a guy like Verlander back, they didn't want to pay the full price at the time. Totally understandable, makes sense. Well, the Mets go and get him, and he starts pitching pretty well when he comes back. And all of a sudden, the Astros lose Urquidy, they lose Garcia. Javier's not pitching as well. Valdez is starting to struggle a little bit. And I think it takes a certain amount of like non-ego and just, hey, let's get it right. Let's not be right to say, no, you know what? Actually, now let's go back and reacquire him and let's sort of right that wrong. And to be able to do it while not giving up any of baseball's top 75 or so prospects, I know we kind of beat that horse to death, but I think it kind of goes back to where that's what makes today impressive for me from their perspective is they're not sitting there and going, you know what, but we decided in the offseason we weren't making that investment. We need to hold strong in that. They're going, no, I think circumstances changed and they react to it.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, and this is another thing that when people were tweeting out, oh, well, why didn't you just sign him? At the time, it made no sense to spend $40 million on a guy who struggled in the postseason, struggled with injuries, and you were 7 deep. I mean, you didn't mention Hunter Brown, but you mentioned all the other guys. You were 7 deep going into the season. What's that?
Wasn't even a starter in a rotation at opening day.
Yeah. I mean, they were 7 deep going into the season. And so at the time, it didn't make sense. But yeah, once you lose Garcia, and once McCullers is, and McCullers is kind of like Michael Brantley. He really shouldn't exist. We should just, it's one of those things like if you have a document of Astros players, we should just roll a black line through them and, basically delete them from Earth because they don't exist. And McCullers gets hurt. And suddenly you're down to 5. And now, and then JP France comes out of nowhere. And you got this guy in the rotation now. I mean, who of us would have said before the season JP France was going to be a contributor to this rotation? But it's different now. And now you do need that horse. And so, yeah, now you get him back for not even half the price of what you would have paid. And you give up a couple of guys. Maybe they turn into players. Maybe they don't. Who cares? They're prospects. And I just think the people who say, oh, well, you should have just signed him before the season, it's a different situation now. And this is what I hate about black and white people. I mean, not, physically black and white, but people who see things in black and white. It's like, oh, well, you could have just signed him. It's like, no, things change. The environment changes. The goals change. And look at the Mets. You think the Mets were going to be sellers at the trade deadline? At the beginning of the season? Things change. And in this case, the Astros, yeah, it changed. And now they go and get a guy back. And I think it's a perfect move.
Yeah. I mean,
I like that.
Was that racist of me, by the way?
Yeah, you're already getting called a racist on the chat.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway there is you can only work with the information you have at any given moment, and it's like an absurd example of it. I saw somebody in the chat mention earlier, right? The Dodgers in 2016 badly needed a bullpen arm. The Astros were sellers at that point in time. Dodgers traded away a guy named Yordan Alvarez, who at the time I think was like 17 years old. He was a nothing prospect for Josh Fields. And, it's funny because, obviously Dodger fans now look back at that and they go, holy cow, what could have been? And understandable. But like in 2016, nobody batted an eye, right? And it's just like you have to live with the fact that that's going to happen every once in a while. It just is what it is. Like you can't be upset about it now.
Yeah, there's no different. There's no different than the NFL draft. I mean, so many guys go in. They're all these highly touted prospects and a bunch of guys out in the later rounds of the unsigned free agents that turn into studs that with great careers or even Hall of Fame careers. It's every sport. It's so damn hard to figure out who's going to be great. So, the hindsight and the revisionists can say what they want, but these guys are professionals. They still don't get it right all the time. So, like I said, play the cards that you dealt.
Well, and it's funny because let's go back to the Jeff Bagwell trade where the Red Sox get ripped all the time, but at the time they needed a bullpen arm to try to win the division. And they had no idea Jeff Bagwell was going to turn into a Hall of Famer. Those happen, but those are pretty rare, to be honest. If you go back and look at prospect trades for players, and the Alvarez thing's really interesting. And Dalton, I'm sure you know this story as a Dodger fan, but when the Astros called and asked about him, they initially tried to sign him out of Cuba, and I don't know what happened, but somehow the Dodgers got him. And when they were looking for a trade. They asked for Alvarez, and at the time, the Dodgers had a much better prospect named Alvarez. And they're like, "Oh,
Yep.
no way, we're not doing that." It's no, we want Jordan, the Cuban guy. It's like, "Oh, okay." So it's weird how these things happen, and it
Yeah.
worked out great for the Astros. I mean, let's be honest. He gave Houston its greatest sports moment last year with that home run against the Phillies. And I've been in the city a long time, and I was like, "There's never been anything like that." I mean, and not only to just hit that home run in that situation, but to hit it where he did and how he did it. And it's like all of us are just and I've told this story I think before, but at the time, before I got kicked out of my house by my ex, I was living downtown, and yeah, Brandon knows where I lived. It wasn't. It was
Which time?
about a
Which
half mile from Minute Maid. And so I was having to write a story for the Astros book that we did for the now defunct Gallery Sports. And so I'm writing it. And so I go sit down on the balcony to have a smoke. And my TV was like 30 seconds behind, right? Because I'm on Fubo. I hear this immense roar from Minute Maid. And I knew Jordan was at the plate. And it's like I knew what had happened. And I'm just like, oh my God, I got to run back inside to watch this. But they were still screaming after it happened. And it was so cool. It was just such a great moment. And, that's what the trade deadline's about. Let's add these guys. And maybe it's the prospect that wins it for you 4 years from now. Or maybe it's JV. Or maybe it's Scherzer who goes out there and wins you a World Series this year. That's why I love this. I mean, it is, it's so funny because you kind of have the three tiers, right? You have teams that are buying. You have teams that are maybe, maybe not, and then you have teams that are selling. But you have to have that fit, right? And it's like we're talking about the Dodgers. It's like you can't help it when a guy just says no, I don't want to go there. I got a no trade. And this is sometimes this is more fun to me than the actual baseball. Am I wrong about that?
I don't think so.
Yeah, if you're a baseball nerd, then yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, I love deadline day. I woke up this morning and the first thing I'm doing is just refreshing Twitter repeatedly, trying to see if anything had broken while I was asleep. So no, for me it's one of the more fun days of the year because there's just so much that is going to change in the next 12 hours.
Well, it's kind of funny because Brandon and I were at lunch today, and at the bar where we were at, we had him put MLB Network up. And about 5 minutes after we did, that's when the Verlander trade happened. And everybody in the bar is like going on and on about it. And then, of course, we had a couple. One of our friends who's a bartender is just an absolute troll. It's like, oh, we'll trade Jeremy Pena, trade Alex Bregman. I'm like, guys, stop. You're the Astros. You don't trade major league players. You're the Dodgers. You don't trade major league players. You're trading prospects to get stuff. But it was a really cool moment because there were people in there applauding when it happened.
Oh yeah. Everybody look at Fred and they're like, "Hey, go get on camera."
I said yesterday if something happened, we would do an extra podcast. But the one thing, and I want to get back to this, and Brandon, I'll let you go first, and then Dalton, I want to get your take. I slip away for a second, but the Kendall Graveman trade, I think, is underrated. The bullpen has been taxed because the starters haven't been able to go long enough. And they've got a good bullpen, but it's just like anything else. You cannot tax those guys like that. You can't keep sending them out there and putting them in high leverage situations and expect it to work. And, you've got a couple guys that just haven't been good this year. I can't remember his name, Montero. Yeah, but,
Starting with a Raphael.
yeah, and he was fantastic last year, right? But guys like Nerys and even Abreu and Stanek, you put too many innings on them,
Right.
and you put pressure on them. And I think Graveman takes a lot of pressure off that. And Brandon, I'll let you start.
No, I mean, you're exactly right. And there's a reason these guys aren't starters. I mean, a couple of them are middle relievers or set up men, but for the most part, they're only good for a couple innings, 20, 30 pitches. Montero earned that. He earned that contract last year. Has he been playing towards it? Hell no. He has been just terrible. He's been going in lately. It's probably some of Dusty's wisdom. Going in lately only when the game's pretty much locked up, like you saw him last night when we're up by 4 runs on Cleveland. That's when you get Montero in there and try and get him to work out that funk. But just pulling up the bullpen, 3.86 combined ERA. What's our whip at? 1.29 whip. Okay, so bullpen is not terrible, but if you recall, in our championship run last year, we had the best bullpen in Major League Baseball. They had an ERA like of around it was like a sub 2.5.
Yeah,
and they've been better in the postseason. And a lot of people will argue, yes, it was some clutch hitting, but mostly it was the bullpen that kept it together. After a poor Justin Verlander start, kept it together. After Lance McCullers got touched up, kept it together. So all these, I mean, they cannot be underestimated or underappreciated how good these bullpens have to be, or at least in good form, or have dependable pieces before you go on a big postseason run. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think that bullpens are difficult in general. There's a reason that the smartest GMs in baseball aren't out there giving 4, 5, 6 year deals to bullpen arms, right? Like year to year, it's really difficult to predict success from bullpen arms. There are only a handful of guys around the league who are reliable in that sense. And I think for me, you pack your bullpen with guys who have good stuff, who, if they are locating well and they're at their best, you know that the stuff will play. And then you wait and you see, okay, what's going on around the league? Who can I shop for when because by the time you get to the trade deadline, you have an idea, okay, which guys have it this year. To me, getting a guy like Graveman, who is a veteran, who's pitched in big spots before, all it does is it raises your floor, and that's really helpful because that way, if you have a guy like Montero who just isn't finding it, you don't have to go to him in a spot that you would have had to go to him. It just and it's something that as a Dodger fan, I wish they would have addressed more. But every new bullpen arm raises your potential floor because it gives you another option because you don't know which of your guys are going to fall apart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And real quick, Falcon, something Todd the show just said. It's crazy because Montero has some good stuff. And Todd's exactly right. I just pulled up his baseball savant profile. His whiff percentage, his fastball velocity, his chase rate, hard hit, average exit velocity, spin, all elite. If you're looking at your baseball savant page, red means good, blue means bad. But the results just haven't been there. Has he been a little unlucky? Perhaps. You can check his fit for that. But Todd's right. His stuff has been good. He just hadn't been getting outs.
Well, and this is something I want to give the Astros credit for. Is like they found Montero and he was fantastic last year. Nobody knew who the hell he was. Hector Neris was average as hell in Philadelphia. They find guys, and that's the thing about bullpen arms. Every now and then you get somebody who adjusts to what you're doing and does very well. Dodgers done a good job of that too. It's like they have guys that you haven't heard of that you go out there. Oh, he's got a 1.79 ERA. So it is a little surprising when the next year the guy sucks, but in reality, we're not talking about long-term guys. I mean, we're talking about guys who can fill the role. So, but yeah, I think the Astros have done a really good job with that, and it'll be interesting. Okay, so I'm going to ask you both before we wrap it up. What team do you think came out of this in the best shape from the moves they've made? And there's really been nothing major happen since the deadline went because I've been keeping up. So I don't think we're going to get anything else. So I'll start with you, Brandon.
Well, the biggest acquisition that was possible was Shohei Ohtani. Obviously, it didn't happen. So Justin Verlander is now going to be the biggest acquisition. It goes to the defending champions, who have been middling in offense, who've been middling in pitching, but are still find themselves a half game out of the AL West and the first best odds in the American League to win the World Series. So now we are far and away the best shot of AL representation in the World Series and to repeat, which hasn't been done in like 30 years. So I will say the Houston Astros made the biggest impact today. We improved the best odds. Second, I would say that the Rays did good picking up. Was that Savali? Yeah,
Yeah.
Savali. They're the only team that I believe would compete with us on a starting pitcher level and an offensive level. They have been up and down just like we have been, but we all know how dangerous hitters they are. I think that they probably with Savali they boosted their potential as well. But give me Astros, give me Rays, and then probably the Jays for shoring up their infield.
Dalton?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Brandon ended up giving you 3 answers. The third of which was because I wasn't going to give Houston because I knew Brandon was going to talk. And I think they're the obvious answer because they addressed 2 major needs and they did it effectively without giving away any big league talent. And a lot of those offensive woes are just a matter of them being healthy. Jordan and Altuve both being back does that. But I think that the Toronto Blue Jays might be my answer outside of Houston. They quietly overhauled that bullpen. And Jordan Romano went down. That's a big injury for them. They'll get him back eventually. But going and getting Jordan Hicks from the Cardinals the way they did, that's a guy with electric stuff. You get him with better pitching coaching. He's probably in the zone a little bit more. Under the radar for them, Genesis Cabrera has been excellent since he got moved over there from St. Louis. That's a lefty who throws gas. Guys like Jimmy Garcia, they're quietly a lot deeper in the bullpen now than they were about a month ago. And
Right.
You talk about a starting rotation that can compete with anybody in when it comes to the postseason. I really think they have that rotation. They get Hyun-Jin Ryu back tonight, which I don't know how he's going to fare, but that's another arm that could provide value for them down the stretch. But to me, the Blue Jays are a little bit scary. I think they're a team that did some good things, picking up DeYoung. That's going to be, that's another guy that can provide a power bat for them off the bench. It just lengthens their lineup in spots where Merrifield might need a night off. Bichette might need a night off when he's healthy. So I think it was a big deadline for them. I think quietly, and I hate saying it, I think quietly the Padres had a really good deadline. Some of the stuff that they did going and getting Scott Barlow, that adds another option to a bullpen for them that struggled to get the ball to Hader at the end of the game. Garrett Cooper is a bat that lengthens that lineup. I think and look, for me, you and I talked about it yesterday about what are signs that you want to buy on a team, signs that you want to sell on a team. Padres right now are a blinking buy signal for me. Their stats with runners in scoring position have been good. They're 0-10 in extra inning games. A lot of that is not sustainable stuff. That's stuff that will flip with time. And we know how much talent they have. The fact that they didn't go the Mets direction, they're not that far out of the wild card. I think the Padres are kind of like the Blue Jays, a team that could make noise.
You know what? I agree with every team you guys talked about, but I'm going to throw one more snake in the grass for you. And by the way, you guys put your Twitter handles on the chat because if you guys aren't following these two, you should be, especially if you're going to bet. I love what Anaheim did. I think they got a couple of really good bats, and they're trying to build around Ohtani and make a run here. But they got some bats, they got some arms. I think they made some underrated moves. Now, is it going to be enough to get them in the playoffs? They're not far off. But, and I always joke about them because they're one of those teams that you look at and it doesn't matter what they do. It's like me with marriage, right? It doesn't matter what you do. You're going to bleep it up. That's the Angels. But I love what they did. I love that they decided, hey, we're not going to be sellers. We're going to try to prove to Ohtani that we can win. And let's go get these guys. And Grichuk and guys like that, they picked up a couple of bats. They picked up some arms. And they're kind of under the radar because they didn't make the splash moves. But they made moves for good players that are going to help that team. And and maybe it's enough. I mean, they're in the mix. They're kind of on the border. I do agree. I think the Jays did everything right, and I think that's probably my favorite. And I think the Rangers did a great job too, because they didn't just get Scherzer; they got Montgomery. I mean, they improved the rotation, but I think the Angels are kind of sneaky. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first of all, I really appreciate you calling them Anaheim.
Mhm.
As a Los Angeles Dodger fan, I don't refer to them as Los Angeles.
Oh no, they're Anaheim forever, just like the Chargers are always going to be San Diego. I don't care how many years they're in LA, but whatever.
Yeah,
I knew you'd find a way to slide that in there, Dalton. I knew you would.
I had to. But yeah, I mean, no, but look, I think with the Angels, certainly, like I talked about with the Yankees earlier, right? I think you need to pick a direction and sprint in that direction, right? You either need to sprint backward or sprint forward, is how I see it. The Angels picked a direction. They decided we're definitively and with conviction going to buy. We're going to compete, and they made moves that reflected that. I don't know if it gets them over the hump. As a Dodger fan, I hope it doesn't, because I think the most likely scenario, if it doesn't, is that Shohei Ohtani signs at Chavez Ravine, and I think the Dodgers are probably saving up to do that. But if you're the Angels and you've got arguably the best player in the history of the game, you need to make a decision. You either need to trade him for everything you can get, or you need to keep him and do everything you can to convince him to stay. So once they decided to keep him, the only option was to go all in, and I think they did.
Right.
Yeah, like Fred said, I mean, they shored up some bullpen. Randall Grichuk, they picked up from Colorado. I mean, he's a really clutch player. He's a young guy too. The AL West is just so damn competitive. I mean, Seattle's sneaky good. Texas and Houston are obviously loading up for war to go into the postseason. I don't think they make the postseason this season. However, I think they're setting themselves up to be contenders and to keep Ohtani, maybe even make him a career player there for the future. So I appreciate them not basically cutting their own balls off and just go ahead and saying, you know what, we're not going to be the team that let the greatest generational talent, the best baseball player on the planet go. We went ahead and tried and did something with his career.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. There were two directions to go, and Dalton and I talked about this yesterday on the show. And once they decide to keep him, then yeah, let's try to make the playoffs and show him what we can do, because I mean they've got talent on that team. They remind me a lot of the Rangers last year. You look at the lineup, you look at the pitching, you look at the numbers. It's like, why do you suck? It's just they didn't know how to win, and then they made some key additions. And I think the Angels are close. Anaheim Angels are close to that, and we'll see what happens. And one more that I want to ask about, because I don't know who brought it up on the chat, because I just got the chat open because we just sort of jumped into this. But somebody mentioned the Marlins, and I think they've done some good things too. I'm curious about your guys' thoughts.
They drafted another pitcher. They took LSU's pitcher, blanking on the kid's name right now, the stud from the World Series.
Oh, stop with your LSU love. I mean, I know they were good, but
well, no, I mean, but they did. I mean, they just keep stockpiling the pitching over there. I mean, clearly, this direction they're going. It's really the only thing that kind of keeps them relevant. They're not getting any bats anytime soon. I don't know. I've not seen anything from them to assume that they're not going to be anything but an automatic under bet every time they come up every day. I don't have much on the Marlins. What do you think, Dalton?
I don't agree. I think what they did at the trade deadline was pretty huge for their offense. Jake Berger is a guy who should have been a way bigger part of the plan in Chicago, in my opinion. That guy's got crazy power. I think he's a great pickup. I think Josh Bell is a great pickup. I think they made legitimate improvements. Jorge Soler has been unbelievable. Obviously, we know what Arise is doing. Jazz Chisholm just came back off the injured list yesterday. I think that's a pretty decent offensive core for a team that already has the pitching. I mean, who in a short series, like let's say Sandy Alcantara starts to figure it out. Who in a short series wants to deal with Sandy and potentially Jesus Luzardo the way he can go? I don't know. I'm actually a little bit higher on them than you are, because I think that pitching will continue to, they're young, right? I think that pitching will continue to do what it does. And they made some additions. I think they're going to continue to add to their offense in the offseason. I don't know. I'm kind of bought in on them.
I'm not saying they haven't already established some of their pitching pieces. Not this year, though. I appreciate the fact they got a little bit of offense stat, because Soler was the only source of offense they've had pretty much all damn season. So, I mean, look out for them in the next couple seasons. But for this season, I have taken no on the playoffs, I believe is what I bet.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of go with Dalton on this. I know they're close, and I think they added some key players. I mean, Josh Bell is to me is a guy who can produce runs for you. They've added some offense to what's a pretty good pitching staff, and again, they're another team that if you just get on an 8-2 run, you're right there. So yeah, I kind of like what they did. I know we all kind of ignore. I mean, and also I don't think Cincinnati can sustain what they're doing. I think there's a couple teams ahead of them that I don't really believe in, and I could see the Marlins making a run. I think they're one of those teams that's in the mix, and I like what they've done. Of course, if they do get in the playoffs and win, then they'll tear the whole thing down again. But that's what they do in Miami.
That's what they do.
Yeah, but yeah, I like the moves. All right, guys. Any final thoughts before we cut it off? I can't thank you guys enough for joining me, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. We talked about it yesterday. Yeah, if something major happens, let's just get on and talk about it. And I got the two best guys to do it. So, any final thoughts on trade deadline before we shut it down?
Nothing else really from me. Thanks so much for having me. It was a good time. I'm always looking for outlets to talk about this stuff. So this was a lot of fun.
Hey, tell everybody what else you're doing, Dalton, so that they can follow you on Twitter and get your get all your writing and all that stuff.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, I put my Twitter on there. It's at Dalton on Sports. Most of what I do on Twitter is sports betting oriented. So I give out free daily picks there for baseball betting, and I work over at bettingpredators.com. I write a daily article with a couple best bets. On a bit of a hot streak with those, so go check them out. But yeah.
Yeah, you were 11-2 before you came in yesterday, and then you gave the people the Astros last night.
Oh no, so did I.
Well, hey, I had Astros team total over. They came through late. I ended up. I went 1-1 yesterday, so I'm on a 12-3 in the last 15 now.
That doesn't suck. I mean, I'm not good at math, but that doesn't suck. And I'll just tell you guys, both these guys I've worked with for a while. First at Sports Map Elite, and then at the now defunct Gallery Sports, and they're just great to work with. They're fantastic handicappers, and and we talked about this yesterday. We did so much amazing work at Gallery that I don't know a lot of people appreciate, but it's some of the best work that any of us have ever done. And it's a shame that it's a shame it went the way it did. It had nothing to do with us. The editorial content was fantastic. And Brandon, tell them how they can follow your picks. You've been doing pretty well too.
Yeah. At BC_Houston1, BetUS Pro, and I do some work as well with Sports Data Now. So write-ups are there. Currently up 40 units on Major League Baseball, so it has been going pretty damn well. Nothing today because I don't know. Trade deadlines are crazy, so nothing posted today. But every now and again, Dalton and I get together for the Touch 'Em All Baseball show. Hoping to fire that back up again as someone orders to my door. I apologize. And catch me on the Falconcast every couple of weeks, chopping it up with Fred. Fred, thank you so much for having me on. I've got a question before we go out for you two guys to get y'all on the record. Who's winning it all? Who's going to the championship?
Honestly, I'm gonna. I just feel like this is a quiet Dodgers year, and I think the Astros are probably making the World Series again because that's what they do. But yeah, I kind of feel like it's an NL year, and Virginia Buttonweed mentioned the Braves. I think it's Dodgers or Braves.
Well, my plan was to be the contrarian villain, evil one, and say Dodgers over Astros in 4. Not for any other reason other than the fact that I'm a Dodger fan and I work closely with a lot of Astros fans. Now, I'm not one of those people who harbors all sorts of bitterness or whatever. I was at Game 7 in 2017. I had some great conversations with Astros fans at that game. Congratulated them at the end of it. It was, it is what it is. Everything that's happened since, but I just think it'd be fun for me and for folks like y'all to watch that again. And obviously, that's how I'd hope it would go. So just to play the villain, Dodgers in 4.
Before we get to Brandon, how did you feel about losing at home where they couldn't cheat in Game 7?
Well, look, first of all, it was
how many runs did you score in that game? I can't remember. I think it rhymes with 1.
Yeah, I was at game 1, I was at game 6, and I was at game 7. It was an experience of a lifetime. I got to see 2 World Series wins, which was awesome. I was with my dad at all 3 of the games, which was awesome. So, look, I can't complain.
Yeah, I think we'd love to see a rematch. Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely love a rematch. I was at the championship win with my dad this last season, and we left, and he said he could die a happy man. So you can't replace those memories or those experiences with anything in the world. So I'm pulling for the Astros. I think we have all the pieces. I'll go ahead and take the Stros to go to the AL. I haven't decided between the Dodgers and the Braves yet. So I need to see how they look now after all these moves have been made. But yeah, give me the Astros over the Dodgers or the Braves in the World Series.
Well, shocker, Kira is picking the Astros, so she just came up to tell you guys that. All right, hey, thank you so much. I didn't intend for this to turn into a full hour-long podcast, but some great information. It was a lot of fun. I want to thank all the usual listeners for showing up and chatting on the Twitch, and just want to remind you we'll be back Thursday with AJ. I hope to have Dalton. And okay, so we're real close to being able to do 3 days a week. And if we get to that, I'm going to have Dalton and Brandon every week on one of the
Kira's
shows.
picking violence.
What's that?
Kira's picking violence. Andre Ware, hilarious.
By the way, it's Kyra, and everybody spells it as Kira with an I. But the reality is, I named her after. And I know a lot of you guys know I watch movies, but I named her from Chronicles of Riddick, where if you know the storyline, and yes, you know the story, Kira, you don't have to paw on me. But in Pitch Black, there's a kid named Jack who's actually a girl. And so in the second movie, Chronicles of Riddick, which is the best of the 3, he runs into her in a prison, and she says, "The name's Kira now, and I'm a new animal." And she was really hot, by the way. But I heard that line in my head when I met Kira, who my friend rescued, and so I named her Kira, but it's with a Y. So anyway, and Andre's like, UH didn't teach me how to spell well. No, it's not. No, everybody gets it wrong because like I even took her to the vet the other day. It's like, Kyra. No. You guys got to watch Chronicles of Riddick. I'm sorry. It's my problem. It's like I have too many obscure movies. Anyway, guys, I appreciate it so much. I'll be talking to you both soon. Well, I talk to Brandon pretty much every day, but Dalton, hopefully by next week, I've got one more sponsor. We start a Wednesday show, and I'd love to have you on every week to just talk stuff. So
Sounds great. Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much.
all right, and Brandon will be on with me Monday. Obviously, Thursday is AJ Day. Monday, I will have Brandon. I'll have a comedian friend of mine who's going to be emceeing our charity event on the 26th, and one more guest, which I haven't booked yet because it's only Tuesday. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Appreciate all of you, and thank you guys so much. Great conversation. I appreciate you so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Later, guys.
All right.